think we have a pretty good showing if you want to get started. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Carla. Yeah, we have about 20 folks, so we've got a good showing. I know a few more are going to be joining shortly. So welcome, everyone. My name is Cristina Sarcho. I'm president of the Hispanic National Bar Association. And one of the distinct privileges that I have is to be able to kick off this series. So as many of you know, we have started in 2025 the Su Futuro, Su Carrera series to really focus on giving our lawyers skills on, to be able to take their personal and professional lives to the next level. And we have on the call with us, I'm accompanied by Mia Batista, who is the VP of Program Su Futuro, who really spearheaded this effort along with Carla Martin, the HMBA Director of Programs. And then we also have Leanne de la Riva, who's HMBA VP of Division Sections and Committees, and President-elect Rosbeli Marquez Morales on the call with us. I am so pleased to introduce Maritza Rodriguez to you today. She will be moderating today's panel. Maritza is a family law attorney. She's based in New Jersey, and she has graciously agreed to be the co-chair of the HMBA Attorney Wellbeing Committee, along with co-chair Maria Cortez. Maritza also is a professor at Rutgers Law School, so if she doesn't have enough on her plate, she's doing us the honors of moderating today's panel. But I'm really excited about the panel, primarily because it's January. We're probably all a little bit in the dumps after a joyous holiday season. But you always see on social media, everybody always having a good time, right? On LinkedIn and on Instagram, people are always celebrating their successes. And I think it's really important for us to actually talk about some of our challenges and some of the issues that we face. We have more failures than successes. We just never talk about them. And so I think this is really good to help each other be open and frank about sort of our struggles, because frankly, you're not alone. We all go through this, and I'm really excited about the esteemed members of the panel today. So Maritza, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and good evening to everyone. Good afternoon if you're joining us from the West Coast. And thank you so much to everybody for being here. I'm extremely honored to be moderating today's panel, and just really also honored to be participating as a co-chair for the HNBA on this amazing initiative. And it's so needed, and I'm just excited that given the survey that took place and all the the reports that'll come out in the future and all of the initiatives going forward, it's time, and it's amazing that it's happening now, because it's especially needed now. So I know it's not always easy to carve out time for events like this, but like our president said so well, that it's really important also for you to know that you have a family here to get some to lean on, and also to talk about these issues, and when not only when things are going well, but also when they're not going well. And it feels like we're entering a new era. This is a new year. We're all carrying a lot, professionally, personally, and globally. We're still feeling the ripple effects of COVID, whether it's changes in how we live and work, and sometimes also just the lingering grief from the personal losses that we had, or the long-term emotional toll that the pandemic took on us. The world around us seems to be in a constant state of flux. We've had these natural disasters that we've seen. We've also had these devastating fires in California. So our thoughts are with all of our members there. And of course, there's change in the air, right? We have a new presidency coming, and with this political shift, there's going to be changes, and that may or may not affect a lot of what we do. So with all of that happening, it's no surprise that many of us feel really overwhelmed, uncertain about what may or may not happen, and for the first time, not knowing why we're feeling how we're feeling and what to do about it. On a personal level, the new year can bring its own mix of emotions. For a lot of people, it has to do with fresh beginnings and goal settings. But for other people, it could be a really hard time because of loss. And it can be also just financially draining and overwhelming. So it's a lot to process all around. And as attorneys, we're often expected to hold it together. while meeting tight deadlines, continuing to serve our clients and manage everyday demands. We wear multiple hats, not just as lawyers, but also as caregivers, community leaders, and advocates. And so, with so much going on, the line between thriving and merely surviving sometimes can feel razor thin. So that's exactly what we're here today to talk about these changes, explain why they're happening, and perhaps to give you some reassurance, as Christina mentioned, that you're not alone in feeling the overwhelm. This panel is hopefully going to equip you with some real practical tools to help you navigate the uncertainty and the pressure. And resilience doesn't mean you have to avoid it. It means finding a way to adapt to it, to recharge, and to feel grounded, especially when things feel overwhelming. So it means a lot um, to have you all on here today because we know how important your time is and how often, with balancing everything else going on, that it is, we're the last to always make time for ourselves. So we're incredibly fortunate to have this outstanding group of panelists who bring a wealth of experience and insight into this discussion. So they'll be sharing some of their personal stories, some research, and some actionable strategies on these topics, and we'll be covering them ambitiously on starting with just understanding what we're experiencing right now, whether it be trauma, loss, and change. And then also talking about how to balance the personal and the professional responsibilities we have. And then lastly, just practical strategies for helping build our resilience in our daily lives. So our goal again is to leave you with some practical tools. And this is one of a series, right? We're not going to leave today and say, okay, we're good. Everyone's good. See you next year. So this is a part of a series. And I will ask each of the panelists to give you a little bit more about themselves. But I'll start off with Reverend Dr. Eric Brewer, who's the founder and senior pastor of Transformed Church Global Ministries and the CEO of Strong Tower Refuge Grief Support Ministry. Then I'll ask Dr. Ruben Lambert, who's a psychologist, a friend to the HBA. He's done many programs for us, and founder of Wisdom Spring Wellness Services and Zen Master. And of course, finally, my co-chair, Maria Cortez, an amazing attorney at Holland and Knight, and as I mentioned, co-chair of the Wellbeing Committee for the HMBA. So, Dr. Brewer, take it away. Welcome.
Yes. Great evening, everyone. Great afternoon. I am so glad to be before you. Once again, my name is Reverend Dr. Eric Brewer. I'm the pastor of Transformed Church Global Ministries. I'm a certified thanatologist. Well, what is a thanatologist? I'm a grief expert. I help people transition end of life care. And I'm also a COVID survivor and a COVID widower. I lost my wife of 21 years early on. My church was in Hackensack in Bergen County. And as you know, that was ground zero for COVID there here in New Jersey. And so I experienced loss personally. I had to bury several family members of the congregation and in the community and just navigate the grief space. And in the midst of my personal grief, I started a national widower support group for men that's across the nation, men who have lost their wives to various illnesses and diseases, and went back, got my doctorate, and I'm here today at the invite of Marisa Rodriguez, and it is my privilege to be here, and great evening once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much and welcome. Dr. Lambert.
Thank you all for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity here to share some of my insights and my experiences. I am a mind and body wellness psychologist and founder of Wisdom Spring Wellness Services, where we provide therapeutic services to people in the community who are facing family issues, depression, anxiety, and trauma-related mental disorders. I have experience working in many different public school systems. At Elizabeth Public Schools, I developed a behavioral disabilities program to give students a second chance to not be removed from the classroom. And we provided them with therapeutic services right there in their home school and tried to rehabilitate them so that they can be successful ultimately in the classroom. And more recently, I'm doing a lot of training in a variety of different organizations because a lot of my passion has to deal with burnout and stress management. And as you've been mentioning earlier, in today's society, whether it's things external combining with things internal in the workplace. It's just created a culture where sometimes it's more about production and we lose sight of the importance of the individual and the human being, and we can never lose focus on that. And so hopefully today I can share some of those insights with everyone here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Maria?
Hi, everyone. As Marita said, my name is Maria Cortez, and I practice commercial real estate at Holland and Knight. So growing up as a first-generation attorney from an inner-city background, I spent my life in both Ponce, Puerto Rico, and Atlantic City, New Jersey. I've seen how tough the legal profession can be, especially when it comes to mental health. The pressure, the long hours, and expectations, they all take a toll. And for many of us in the Hispanic community, there's that added layer of cultural stigma around asking for help. So these experiences have shaped my commitment to supporting mental wellness in our profession, and it fuels my passion for addressing these issues through my work with the HBA New Jersey and also with the Hispanic National Bar Association.
Great, thank you. So let's kick it off. Dr. Lambert, let me start with you. As I mentioned, there's so much going on right now, right? And so
Yes.
would you consider, can you define trauma? It's a word that we often hear. So I wanted to start from the very basics so we all have an understanding of like what trauma is and how does our body experience it?
Very good question. So trauma is primarily dealing with the emotional response to a distressing event. Now, we also have to look at the impact that trauma has on the body. It can have an impact on the physical, the mental, and emotional state of a person. We also have to understand what is a distressful event. In general, it's something where a person feels as though their safety or their life is being put at risk. This is a general definition, right? Then we can get into more of the details a little bit later. And the thing about trauma is it could be real or it can also be imagined. And it could also be directly towards myself, or it could be vicarious, which we'll talk a little bit about that later too. It could be something that I've observed, and it could be where someone that I truly love is being on the receiving end of some kind of damage or some kind of hurt. And the impact that it has on the body is primarily the re-experiencing, right? So psychologically, after the event has finished, a person still carries that with them. Over time, it has a long-lasting impact because they continue to ruminate and re-experience. They can play that situation out over and over in their mind. Now, when you're just going through that memory, if you can let that go, then it doesn't have such a severe emotional consequence. However, every time we go into that memory, what is the emotional balance? What is the emotional charge that we associate with that? If you're dealing with loss, or if you're dealing with the experience of someone that you truly love or yourself being hurt, oftentimes we're going to evaluate that as being something negative. So then you can just think, what are the negative emotions that are associated with that? Maybe it's fear, despair, depression, anxiety. Because when you re-experience these types of situations, oftentimes we believe that we're actually going through those same things right here in this very moment. So, for example, some people that have gone to war maybe experienced loud bombs being exploded, right? They can come back here and they're no longer in that setting where there's a war taking place. Yet, when they hear a sound that's a trigger, let's say a car door being slammed, right? That can then trigger the trauma, then they re-experience. And physiologically, they act out no different than if they were actually in that true moment being threatened by a bomb. So I've had clients where they have like hit the deck if they were military veterans, where they're now jumping underneath a car just because a car door was slammed. And then there are also lasting impacts on the physiology of the body, which primarily it's going to impact the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, and the gastrointestinal system, and also the immune system too, right? So when we talk about the nervous system, we're going to refer to the nerves being overactive, right? So that's going to also stimulate the heart rate, the respiration rate, and that's going to create for a really uncomfortable. You can have tingling sensations in your hands. You can have sweaty palms. You can start to have butterflies in your stomach. You can have bowel syndrome issues. And then we can also take a look at the immune system, which we understand people who are under long-term chronic trauma are going to experience immune system suppression, which basically means you're more likely to get sick. So yeah, you're going to have a variety of different issues and impacts on the body. And these are things that we should be concerned about and things that we should address.
Now, addressing that, taking it one
Yeah.
step further, when we think about trauma, and we can think about it as, the fires going on in California, or
Yes.
like Dr. Brewer said, being a COVID survivor, that's a form of a trauma.
Yes.
And also losing your spouse, which, by the way, I'm sorry. And Dr. Brewer, I want to ask you this. What happens when you experience this kind of loss? Or when you go through something like this? Is there a process that comes along with that we should be aware of?
Yes, grief is a journey. Grief is a response to loss. Unfortunately, a lot of people look at Kubler-Ross five stages of grief and they try to figure out what stage I'm in. Well, she wrote that book on death and dying back in the late 60s, and it's really not applicable to us because she wrote it for those who were in hospice. And so we're trying to use a paradigm to figure out our stage of grief that we're in. Are we in denial, anger, bargaining, depression, or acceptance? But that's not even applicable to our loss and our traumatic situation that we experience. And so we have to look at our trauma and our losses and this journey to I say the grief recovery, let's go that way, as a journey. It's not a stage, because everyone goes through life and handles their loss differently. We all have a loss history. We all have experienced losses. And the way you respond to your losses, some of it is connected directly to where you were socialized as a child. And so now fast forward as an adult, you saw your parents grieve their parents, your grandparents, and if your parents didn't cry, then more than likely you were not going to cry. So the way you respond to it is based upon that person's spirituality, that person's awareness of their own emotions. Have you given yourself permission to grieve, to emote, to be able to have the emotional EQ to even discuss, go to professional help, go to Dr. Lambert and sit down in front of him and say, listen, I need help. Can you say you need help? And that's where it begins. I think we have to override the stigmas of getting and seeking professional help because so many people try to say, I'm not crazy, I can handle it, I'm strong enough. But there's nothing wrong for asking for help.
So just to piggyback on what you said, do you see particularly issues that arrive in our communities, like in the Latino and African American communities
Absolutely. Yes.
that
Absolutely.
come up?
Yes, absolutely. And Black and brown communities and the reality is there's transgenerational trauma. We don't talk about things that are passed down from one generation to the next generation. And as Dr. Lambert talks about in reference to your body, there's a book entitled Your Body Keeps Score. There's things that we experience in our lives that trauma would change your DNA. There's certain things and illnesses and diseases that's assigned to our culture is really not genetic. Is, for example, type 2 diabetes. It's not genetic. You eat like the way your parents eat. And so some things we are dealing with is because of what we saw in the prior generation. And we have to recognize that and say, okay, what's in me that I'm doing or my response is a taught response from what I saw my parents, my community, and we have to get to a place of healing and being whole to be able to face. I would say you have to face it to fix it.
And drawing on just what you just said, a lot of times you can translate that to attorneys, especially first generation lawyers. Uh, we are in these new careers and we don't want anybody to know that we're vulnerable, right? So we're not going to take a day off, right? We're not gonna, why would we take a vacation? Our parents never could take a vacation, right? Uh, and so it's the guilt that comes with that. But actually, thanks to the HMBA, we have some data on what some of our members are experiencing. So to speak to some of what Dr. Lambert mentioned in terms of the physical effects and also what Dr. Brewer is mentioning, Maria, do you have some stats that you could share with us about what our members are going through right now?
Yes. So the good news is that 49% of the individuals who participated in the HNBA Attorney Wellness Survey reported feeling enthusiastic about being a lawyer either often or very often. However, 28% experienced burnout either every day or a few times a week, with female lawyers being almost 3 times more likely than their male counterparts to feel burnout. Also, 32% reported feeling anxious, and 36% indicated experiencing mild depression. Now, when comparing litigators to non-litigators, that's Maritza, litigator, and that's me, non-litigator. Litigators were found to be twice as likely to experience anxiety, 3 times more likely to feel burnout, and 3 times more likely to feel depressed.
Interesting. And what about in general statistics on caregivers? So many of our members are caregivers. Do you have any information to share about those numbers?
Yeah, so actually the American Bar Association released the results of a national study on the legal profession focused on the careers of parents and child caregivers in the field. So the results revealed that approximately 45% of lawyers surveyed reported having active caregiving responsibilities, including for children, aging parents, or other dependents. These individuals will be referred to as caregiving attorneys. So caregiving attorneys reported being 30% more likely to feel overwhelmed with their workloads compared to their non-caregiving counterparts. Also, 60% of caregiving attorneys indicated that balancing professional and personal responsibilities negatively impacts their mental health. Female lawyers were found to be twice as likely as male lawyers to shoulder primary caregiving duties. And finally, 40% of caregiving attorneys stated that they lacked adequate resources or flexible working arrangements within their firms.
Interesting. So thank you for sharing sharing that information. I want to come back to Dr. Lambert. Can you explain, we heard a couple of words. We heard burnout. What does that look like? If you can describe it for us. And how do you know if you're burnt out? I mean, sometimes we're just working and we just think I'm tired.
Yes, that's a good question. I think a general definition of burnout is one has to understand what is the load, what is the capacity that I can handle, right? And how much is being put on my plate. If I'm, let's say, metaphorically speaking, if I can use the metaphor of a one gallon jug and I try to put 1 ton of water into that 1 gallon jug, what's going to happen? The jug is going to shatter. It cannot handle the weight, right? So the first step there to understanding burnout, because when you don't deal with burnout, you're going to experience many different types of symptoms, some of them being physiological. You can be experiencing more aches and pains within the body, more soreness or tightness, right? Sometimes you can even get nervous tics in the eye. You can be experiencing, let's say, issues with sleep, right? You can have a hard time falling asleep. You can be more irritable, whether to your colleagues at work, or you can be displacing that and dumping that on the innocent people at home, whether it's your pet, maybe the cat gets kicked or the dog, or, so burnout. And then people who are actively experiencing burnout might be less likely to show up to work. They tend to take more sick days and things of that nature, right? So we have to be aware of that. But what I was saying, the first step is to know thyself, right? You have to understand who you are, right? You have to be mindful of what your emotional capacity is, what your energy levels are. And then you have to understand what your priorities are, what your responsibilities are outside of the home. You have to understand what your support unit is. And then you have to then measure to see if what the tasks that are being given to you, you're able to manage. And these other things that are high priorities in your life are not being, let's say, time is being taken away from that. Because when that happens, one can get into a very bad state where we have competing priorities. And then you have this approach problem, right? Where I want to be with the kids and I want to be successful at work, but you can't have your hand open and closed at the same time, right? So then if you're able to do, when you understand it's time for me to work, you're able to do that and your mind is light, you're not carrying any burden in your mind, then you're able to, manage your time and then successfully achieve whatever goal you have at that moment. But if you're going to work and then you're feeling, which a lot of parents do, guilt, right?
Resentment.
Resentment because of these competing priorities that I just can't let go of, then now you're going to start to feel some emotional fatigue. Whereas that same, let's say 8 hours of work, you can handle and manage, right? Now at the end of those 8 hours, it might feel like you just ran a marathon. And that's where you have to self-reflect and think about what's going on with me. Know thyself, what's going on with my emotional workload? Is this workload, like physical workload, exceeding what my emotional capacity can handle?
Now let's take
Yeah.
it a step further and
Sure.
talk about one other thing that was raised before. So we talked about trauma, but we've heard this also termed this vicarious trauma that you raised.
Yeah.
Can you define that? What is that?
Well, essentially, you have to differentiate what is a threat, what is something that creates, what is a disturbing, distressful event that creates an emotional response in myself, what is a disturbing event that is and creating an emotional response on other people. So when it's other people, right, it could be loved ones, or it could even be people that you don't even really know. For example, the fires in LA. That would be considered vicarious trauma because you're not actually, there isn't an immediate impending threat on your life, right? However, you can be a caring, compassionate person. You can have a big heart and you can actually start to feel distress, even though it isn't something that you're directly experiencing. We understand this through research. We can look at mothers or something called mirror neurons, right? And we've looked at mothers when they're looking at their baby. And if the baby's happy, we can look at the brain and we can see that the same neurons that are firing, that are causing happiness in the baby, are firing in the mother, right? This is compassion. This is empathy. This is almost every human being has this within themselves, right?
Is it also known as compassion fatigue?
Essentially, then when you are triggering those compassionate neurons that say over time and it doesn't wear and you don't find respite, then you can start to experience what we call compassion fatigue, right? So everything in life requires a balance. So we talked about caregiving, right? So if you're in the caregiving role for too long and you don't find respite, right, then you can experience compassion fatigue. And also people in the service industry, whether it's teachers, lawyers, firemen, doctors, right? When you're giving so much and feeling for other people, you then experience that kind of compassion fatigue. And then it has an impact on your own personal life and your own personal relationship with yourself, because sometimes you don't have enough for yourself. And then sometimes you don't have enough compassion for the people that you love at home. And so then there's
Yeah.
this
And
spillover
and
effect.
that
Mhm.
vicarious trauma, for example, in family lawyers, right?
Yeah.
You're hearing, I specifically work with a lot of domestic violence
Yes.
survivors. So hearing their stories and internalizing it day after
Yes.
day after day, I myself am internalizing it, right? But we can
Mhm.
also see that if you work in the civil world, right? You
Yes.
can be an employment lawyer and work with someone on a sexual abuse allegations or a sexual assault or some kind of hostile work environment. You could be working with people in landlord tenant cases who are losing their homes and then feel deeply affected, right? Because they may
Yes.
not be happening to you, but you can't help but also experience what they're experiencing, right? The
Yeah.
despair,
Mhm.
the emotions. It could also be, in representing in civil litigation, perhaps in plaintiff's injury cases where people have suffered a traumatic accident, or you're defending someone like a doctor charged with being, negligent in a case, accused of being negligent, but you also understand that this is someone that's worked years, right, to protect a degree and to earn this degree, and now they're fighting for their life to save it. So in that way, I want to just draw some real world examples for people to
Yes.
understand. But Dr. Brewer, with these events and everything going on, there comes for some people loss, right? And so when we're grieving it, and I want to just go back to that, it in my experience, I lost my father through COVID as well. Um, loss comes, a grief shows up very unexpected, right? You can't wish it away. You can't tell it, I'm gonna grieve next year. This year's too busy for me. So can you tell us like what advice can you give? Because lawyers, we are type A, and we need things to happen when we need them to happen, but life doesn't work that way. Neither does grief.
Exactly. Grief is like an ocean. It comes like the waves. It comes some days small, sometimes it feels like a tsunami, and it just wipes you out. And
Mm.
you have to give yourself permission to grieve. In fact, grief is normal, is natural, and is necessary. Grief is just a natural response that you experience loss. Grief is the testimony that you loved because you don't grieve over things you don't love. So the greater the love, the greater the grief. And so, like I said, it's normal, it's natural, and it's necessary. You have to grieve to get to that place where you will feel whole again, or you can feel at peace with the loss. You have to be intentional with your self-care. You have to be intentional with growth. I always say the largest room in the world is the room to grow. And so you have to be very intentional in saying, you know what, I've experienced loss and what I'm going to do with it. Now, you can stay stuck and you can stay stuck in the same place for years. And one thing dealing with widowers, really for anyone, because grief is universal, anyone that experienced loss, if you don't uh, make up your mind that I have to move forward, not just move on, because you can stay stuck and move on and have the daily routines, but I need to move forward in my life, which means I'm intentionally doing something. So with widowers, you have to say, well, you're going to take off your wife's clothes out. You're going to do things, take down the pictures or not. You have to be very intentional in moving forward. And so with that, you have to stay in the present because when you grieve, you tend to drift back into the past and you think those past memories and those past experiences, that's it to life. Those are my best days. And you have to appreciate this journey. One thing people used to ask me, "How you doing, Pastor? How you doing?" And some days I wasn't feeling well. Some days I would just say I'm just functioning. But I had to tell myself I'm getting better every day. Every time I woke up, got out of bed, and I had my responsibilities. I took a sabbatical after the loss, but I still had a lot of responsibilities because COVID was at its height still. And I had to make up my mind, I'm getting better every day to the place where I was able to not only live, laugh, and eventually found love again and got remarried. And so that is my lesson to you. For those who are grieving, don't get stuck. Stay in the present and move forward.
So to add to that, thank you. How do we support our colleagues or a friend that may be going through a loss, whether it be a significant personal loss, like the one that you went through, or also, someone like me losing a parent, but also sometimes professional losses, right? Like we could sometimes lose our jobs or just really significant things that go on professionally.
The client, yes. You have to stay in the present. A lot of folks after experience loss, some folks really don't want to pray. They don't want to have a lot of conversation, but they just need to know that you're there and say, hey, I am here for you. You know, they're not going to tell you, hey, I need you to make a dinner for me. I'm hungry. I have not eaten in 2 or 3 days. Say, hey, it would be okay if I could send you a meal, a dinner tonight. Just look at the individual and just let them know that you're there, presence. Two, that you're available for a conversation. You can call me anytime and in the middle of the night. There's many nights I did not sleep A lot of individuals experience loss the probably first month you don't sleep. And I used to also, I used to ask the individuals, when's the last time you had an 8 hour sleep? And if they cannot articulate the last time they slept over 8 hours, up to 8 hours, hey, you need to go to a doctor, or you need to really focus on resting. Well, I can't rest, especially if you lose your spouse. So I say, put all these pillows, put 10 pillows on one side just to trick your mind so you can sleep. Whatever it takes for that person to rest, to have self-care. Um, and so that way you want to say, hey, let's do a spa day. Avail yourself to them, and walking with them in this journey is not just at the funeral or the week after, but even months down the road. Um, Offer yourself, hey, you need help, you want to go grocery shopping. Just look at the person and just try to figure out their needs, because they're not going to be able to communicate what they actually need because they're grieving, they're suffering. And so just be kind. Um, a dinner, Uber Eats, whatever you use, send a nice meal, and they will appreciate it.
I completely agree. And sometimes you don't realize that just even sometimes we don't know what to say to someone. And just I got many messages, and I was myself in those positions many times where I'll admit I actually didn't even reach out because it was more paralyzing to try to figure out what to say than to actually say something. And even if it was too, because I kept thinking it's too small a gesture. And when I myself went through it, and I just got just random texts just saying, I'm thinking of you, I'm just sending you a big hug. And that was all I needed to, that to me it meant the world. So just to tell you that any small gesture is a huge gesture.
Especially
So
edibles or fruit edibles. Telling you.
food is always great too.
Yes, yes.
But Dr. Lambert and Maria, I want to come back to when we were talking about the overwhelm and all of these professional responsibilities that we have, along with the tug of the personal responsibilities. We're often feeling this pressure to prioritize, one over the other, depending which fire we have to put out that day.
Yeah.
Any insights on how we can, you started to talk about it, Dr. Lambert, like setting
Mhm.
those healthy boundaries, and how do we do that?
Well, I think number one, people have to learn to get comfortable, and I know this is hard for everyone, with the idea of saying no. You have to, at work, maybe say no to some kind of task because you have a weekend trip with your family. But then this can create a little bit of spike in anxiety, right? I don't know, maybe in the law profession, you have to work a certain amount of hours, or you have to have a certain amount of cases accomplished in order to achieve, let's say, like a partnership, right? And so if that's very heavy on your mind, if that's a major goal that you have in your life, you have to check yourself and see if your life is losing balance, right? Are you, in order to, on your pathway, there's that saying, right? The end justifies the means. Like, what is the cost benefit of this, right? Is it costing you time with your children at a stage where you're never going to get that back in order to achieve this major goal in your work life profession? And it might be difficult, especially when there's a power differential, which I believe in many companies and organizations, there are a power differential, that if you do say no, what kind of backlash, whether this is a written, sometimes these are like underlying norms, right? That we can't even maybe talk about if we had administrators in the room right now, but we have to talk about it, right? Like, what is going to be the backlash, or what is going to have the impact of me saying no to this case because I have a family priority? So this is something that I think we have to get comfortable with. And you might have to maybe speak to some people with it if you have some relationships, whether it be through HNBA or through the New Jersey Bar Association, people that you trust who maybe have accomplished these things already, or who are in administrative positions, to give you some feedback as to how can I handle this, because they already have that experience. But we have to understand that everything in life can't be parallel. Right there, sometimes there has to be an order to things, right? Like, you have to put on your socks first and then your shoes. So can't have them both you don't do them both at the same time. And then when you're going to have to work, or when you're going to spend time with your family, you have to understand that work has to be put to the side, or have to. So scheduling, and essentially the point that I'm trying to get at here, then, when you have competing priorities, You have to differentiate between urgent and importance, right? Everything can't rise to the scale of urgency. Otherwise, you just imagine like an emergency room, right? If someone got shot versus someone having a fever, they don't take those people at the same time. They have to differentiate that because you don't have enough resources, right? So they differentiate urgency versus importance. Same thing in your life, right? Work is important, family life is important, but they can't both reach the level of urgency. Otherwise, you get this major approach conflict, which creates a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of guilt, right? And burnout, essentially. So we have to learn to evaluate and weigh things with the understanding that they can't both reach the same level of urgency. And then the last thing is you have to also prioritize. So when you make your schedule, don't Sharpie in, I'm sorry, don't pencil in, excuse me, don't pencil in self-care or family time if that's a major priority for you. You have to put that in with a Sharpie. It has to be a Sharpie marker. Sometimes with pencil, it's like, yeah, I'm going to take care of this. And then something else comes along the way. And then you just very quickly erase that. And then you decide to, let's say, work a few extra hours. But when you put that into your schedule with a Sharpie, and if it says self-care, you have to do it because you can't erase that Sharpie marker, right? So, yeah.
Maria?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I know Dr. Lambert talks about how balancing is so important, but balancing caregiving and work is so hard, and the
Very.
guilt is so overwhelming. So I'm a mom of 2 kids, and I know what it's like to feel like you're just not around enough. And what's helped me is letting go of the idea that I have to do it all. It goes back to Dr. Lambert's point, like you say no, right? But instead I focus on being present when I am with my kids, but I also have to make it a point to take care of myself too. So waking up earlier to go for a walk or a run a few times a week so I can just show up to my kids as like my best self. And like Dr. Lambert said with the Sharpie, that's comparable to the calendar invite. So I block off time, like taking my daughter to ballet every week. So I have a calendar invite and I block that time off. And that's just our time together. And it just reminds me that the small intentional moments matter more than just trying to be everywhere all at once. And also hiring help too, right? So if you can hire someone to clean up your house, right, that kind of gives you back a little bit of time. And it'll never be perfect, but it's enough, right? And I'm learning that it is okay that I'm not always there, right? So it takes time.
That's great. Yes, thank you. And I heard an analogy once. I think in a Franklin Covey video on YouTube, that they talked about that all the little activities that we do are the equivalent of like little pebbles. And if we put them in a bowl, and then the big stones are the most important things in our life, we end up with like a bowl filled with pebbles, and we're trying to figure out how to fit the important things in the midst of them. But if you start with the big rocks first, with the things that are the most important, then it gives you more of a priority and a way of looking at, okay, how much of these little things or these other things do I have room for now that I've put in the most important things? So I think also as the new year starts, you might want to just automatically go in and go into your calendar and block off, like Maria said, non-negotiable time. If knowing that you have to, if you haven't seen your spouse probably in 2 weeks because you've been working, then block off that this Friday or this Thursday or Saturday morning has to be breakfast, and that's non-negotiable. You're not going to work that time. And if you have to make it up somewhere else, it'll be somewhere else. But that once you do that over and over, then that times become non-negotiable. So, Dr. Brewer, talk to us about some small daily practices that maybe we can use to cope with the stress, to be a little kinder to ourselves. Because attorneys we are, self-judgment is a real thing. We are very hard on ourselves. We have a negativity bias. So naturally, we're trained to look for what can absolutely go wrong every single day. So we naturally do not give ourselves enough credit for things that go right in our own lives. So how could we be a little kinder?
Well, first, I want to ask this question to the attorneys. What does your life reveal are the most important things to you? And does your life reveal that you are important? And if you're not important, if you're not taking care of yourself, when was the last time you've been to the doctor? When was the last time you had a physical? When was the last time you pampered yourself? I'm talking about go to the spa. I'm not just talking about your nails and your feet done weekly. I'm talking about taking care of you, hiring a trainer, a nutritionist. Um, but the biggest thing is time management. But I'm gonna go another way. We talked about that earlier. Let's talk about energy management. Knowing what drains you, knowing what inspires you. You know, it's so sad when people come home from work, you're so drained, you have nothing emotionally left to pour into your family, to your children. So if you know you're going to be drained when you get home, then let's talk about energy management. So maybe Saturdays or Friday nights is not going to be a good date night with your spouse because you're drained on Friday. So maybe it need to be a Saturday or maybe a Monday night because Mondays tend to be a less stressful day. So know what drains you, know what inspires you. Um, and talk about uh, putting what matters first. Uh, we should first thing in January, we should plan out our vacations for the whole year. Where are you going on vacation for 2025? Yes, you can grind knowing that in 60 days or 90 days, I'm going to be on the beach somewhere. Okay. Having that balance and that self-care in your calendar that at least once a month, I'm going to have a Sabbath time for me. Now, if you're a caregiver and you're taking care of little children or you're taking care of your parents, okay, so you need to still give yourself permission to relax, to, hey, if you have to hire someone to be able to watch your parents or even take a break, with siblings or someone that can come in and watch your kids so you can go pamper yourself at least once a month because we don't want you to burn out. And the greatest gift to your family is you. And if something happens to you, not only are they going to lose the provider, but the job is still going to be up there. They're going to assign your cases to someone else. And so start thinking long term, start thinking holistically about what really matters to me. And the first thing is you are the person that you need to take care of first. It's like an airplane. You say before you take the mask, you put on the mask first so you can help someone around you. You can't put on the mask and try to save everyone else if you don't have any oxygen.
That's great. Now, I have a question for Dr. Lambert, and I think, and then we're going to also leave enough time. Well, let me start with Maria, and then I'll end with Dr. Lambert. What role can your mentors and your friends play, or your other attorneys? Like, how can you learn to lean on them? Because sometimes we don't want to be vocal that we need help.
So mentors, friends, and family are lifelines for attorneys navigating high stress periods. According to the HMBA Attorney Wellness Survey, 30% of attorneys said they turn to their spouse or partner after a bad day. Proof that having someone to lean on makes a difference. Even more powerful is the role of friendships. So attorneys with 3 to 5 close friends are 5 times less likely to face anxiety or burnout, and 7 times less likely to experience depression. So this just shows how vital connection is. And whether that's it's a mentor offering guidance, a friend listening without judgment, or a family member reminding you of what truly matters, these relationships ground us and keep us going. And actually, we were just talking about it, but it reminds me of the new Bad Bunny album, which I love so much. I feel like it's given so many people a chance to reconnect with their family and roots. and understand what is truly important. And at the end of it all, family reminds us that we are not alone. So sometimes just knowing someone is in your corner can truly change everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I think connection is important, and the happiest people are also social people, so they have connections. So let's remember that. Now, I think at this point, I think it's a good point to pivot and ask Dr. Lambert for our last piece of advice, which is if we find ourselves feeling this anxiety, do you have a way, what can we do when we find ourselves in those moments of anxiety? And then can you close us out with a little bit of a meditation?
Sure. Thank you. I would be more than happy, Maritza, to do that. Well, let me start with saying that what I do because I also am in the service industry, right? And I listen to many things that are vicariously traumatizing. So I don't only teach these things, I implement them in my daily practice. These are things that I live. And I can tell you these are what I'm going to discuss are research-based and actually practical, right? We can do them daily. So what I basically do is I take my daily meds. And no, it's not an antidepressant or an antipsychotic, although sometimes I feel psychotic at the end of my day. I could probably use some of that. But and again, if you take those types of things, I am in favor of that with your doctor. But what I mean by meds is it's an acronym. So M stands for mindfulness or meditation, E stands for exercise, D stands for de-stress, and S stands for sleep. So these are my daily meds. I make sure that these 4 things are things that I incorporate into my daily living. And so for meditation, basically, you have to practice and learn about deep breathing and focusing and concentrating your mind and basically doing an alternate control delete of all the things that are a burden in your life, the excess things that can hold you back and weigh you down, so that if your cup is full, like Dr. Brewer was saying before, you have nothing left to give. So you have to empty your tank so that you have more room to fill it with the things that are important and the things that you value. So deep breathing, which we'll talk a little bit about that afterwards, we'll practice some of that, is something that has been studied by research and has been shown to calm the nervous system down, right? Lower the heart rate, lower the respiration rate, clear the mind, help a person be more in tune with the things that drain your energy and the things that inspire you, like Dr. Brewer said earlier, right? If you're not self-aware of that, then you're not going to know or understand that it's time to tap into that, right? So exercise is vital. Exercise has been proven to decrease anxiety, decrease depression, improve flexibility, improve circulation, clearer thinking, better brain functioning, right? And then ultimately ties into better sleep. De-stress, we have to set time aside to create an environment, right? Think about environmental engineering. Sometimes the environment is very important. So if you can set time aside in some place that's almost like a sanctuary, where you can't be contacted by things that are going to distract you or stress you out. It could be your room. It could be a special place in your house that you designate for that. Maybe at your workplace, they've already set space aside. It could be a religious facility, right? But it could be a library, something that's going to help you calm down and inspire you to get into a state of relaxation. This kind of environment is very important because we need this kind of external inspiration also. It's very effective. And then last is sleep. I tell you, this is probably one of the most important things that can help us to decompress and to let go. And it's not so much, yes, the length of time that we sleep is very important. It's something that's always been studied, right? We say 6 to 8 hours, but we're also looking at more and more, and they sell all these apps and watches and things like that. That's not just how long you sleep, it's the quality of your sleep. So we also have to think about that more and more, right? So when we get into a sleep, what do we have a routine before we get into sleep, right? Do we pray? Do we meditate? Because sometimes if you sleep with things on your mind, you start to have these funky dreams or these nightmares. So things that stress you out throughout the day can still follow you into your sleep. So create a routine, right, to let go before you go into sleep. And of course, the blue light stuff, we all know that. We have to decrease all lights, right? When we don't have any light, that's when melatonin gets released. And that's that beautiful hormone that helps us relax, fixes the cells throughout our body, and helps us wake up refreshed and anew. So even the little lights, I'm gonna go so far as to say, even if like you have a TV light on or a night light, if we can try to really not have any light, make our room as dark as possible. And I know this is very difficult and very challenging, but if you can be asleep, because we have two major bursts of melatonin, one at 10 p.m. and one at 2 a.m. If you can be asleep, and I know this can be very challenging with work and stuff like that, that is going to give you a nice strong dose of melatonin, but you have to be asleep throughout that window, right? So sleep is very important. And then let's practice. So take your daily meds, right? Meditation, exercise, de-stress, and sleep. Make sure you incorporate that and you target those 4 areas. Yeah, if we don't have any further questions or comments, then I'd be more than happy to lead everyone in a meditation.
We're gonna do a mini meditation.
Yeah, mini one,
to
yes.
close it out.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So let's put yourself in a comfortable state. If you're sitting, put your feet flat on the floor. You can fold your hands, touch your thumbs. Be mindful of your body. Be self-aware of, let's say, your shoulders. Bring your shoulders back and down. You have 2 options. You can close your eyes, but sometimes if you close your eyes, you can start to daydream, and then you can engage in snoring meditation, which is cool. We can do that later on before bed, but for right now, we're not going to be doing the snoring meditation. But you can close your eyes, or you can find just a point, something to stare at, to just kind of put your eye gaze there. And we're going to engage in some deep breathing. So I'd like for everyone to make their breath deeper, longer, and quieter. We're going to inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Just takes 3 natural breaths. And as you inhale, I'd like for you to be mindful of the air as it touches your nose, and then the air as it escapes, as it touches your lips. And give yourself permission to relax. Right now in your mind, if you can just tell yourself, I work very hard and I deserve this moment to relax. And now I'd like for us to deepen and lengthen our breath. So if you can increase your inhalation just a few more seconds. So if you've been breathing, let's say, for example, 1 or 2 seconds in, I'd like for you to try to make it 3 or 4 seconds. Just lengthen the inhalation, lengthen the exhalation, make your breath deeper. Do this now.
Hello. Okay. Go for it. Thank you. It's starting to Zoom.
And so the
Yeah.
breathing is very powerful when you combine it with positive thinking. So now that we are on our rhythm of slow, gentle breaths, I'd like to add a inhalation mantra and an exhalation mantra. So as you inhale, I'd like for everyone in their inner mind to tell themselves, I'm inhaling cool, calm, relaxing energy. And as you exhale, I'd like for you to think of something that's been stressing you out and burdening you throughout the week. And I'd like for you to exhale, let go, release that. So we're going to inhale, cool, calm, relaxing energy. And we're going to exhale, release whatever tension, whatever burdens we've been carrying. Allow yourself to be more and more relaxed. Embrace deep, relaxing energy. And know that the breath can be your sanctuary. It could be a place that you can retreat to because you carry it with you wherever you go. Whatever stresses you, whatever worries you, you can always just Refer back to your breathing and just be fully present with a cool, calm breath. I'd like for you to now call your mind's awareness back to my voice, and you can look up or open your eyes. And just know that we all have the innate capacity for healing and growth. We just sometimes have to get out of its way. And a lot of these techniques and a lot of these practices are helping us revert back and get in tune with the deep peace and quietude that we have all within ourselves. We just forget. These are little reminder rituals to help us remember that we can achieve a state of optimal wellness. We just have to put things into practice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lambert, for that meditation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, to the HMBA, to our president for taking on this initiative, and to this incredible team that put it all together. Mia, thank you so much. And we're excited to offer more programming in the future, and I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We'll be back. We'll have more. Stay tuned, and feel free to drop any last minute notes in the chat. And if you want